One of the hottest congressional races in the nation, plus a man who has lots to say about both the governor and the mayor and the state of the city. The Point starts right now. Westchester County Executive George Latimer wants his next stop to be Washington. He's running for Congress against incumbent Jamal Bowman, who has refused numerous invitations to appear here on The Point. This has been the most expensive primary congressionally in the entire nation. And as you can see from all the mailings that have gone out, it is an amazing amount of money that's being spent on this race. Why has this been so expensive, and why is there a need to spend so much money, not only on mailers, but on robocalls and TV advertising, the whole 9 yards?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Marcia, because my first race for public office came for the Rye City Council in a community, my home community of 15,000 people. And I think I had 1 or 2 mailings in the whole campaign, and I knocked on doors, and that's the way I campaigned. And I've always campaigned that way, up to and including county executive, where, you know, we didn't have this overwhelming TV situation. My opponent has a nationwide network of support. It connects into Bernie Sanders, Our Revolution, and you can't compete with that unless you can generate money as well. We've generated in this campaign the majority of our money from within the district, and the vast majority of his money, 90% of his money, comes from outside the district. So what I'm watching is a nationwide effort to keep him in this seat, and I think what you're watching, if you're looking at it from the outside, is that my base is local in all the zip codes of this district. Now, the money that's involved in competing does require you to communicate in all the means of communication, but we weren't the first to the mailboxes, and we weren't, you know, the first to make these things. Does this mean that, would you support some kind of campaign finance reform going forward? Yeah, I would. Because, I mean, some would say that this is an obscene amount of money that's being spent. Well, keep in mind, you know, a lot of these expenditures are coming from independent groups that are outside of the control of myself as a candidate and arguably him as well. I would certainly support much stronger campaign restrictions, but keep in mind that it's the Supreme Court through Citizens United and way back when, Buckley versus Vallejo, that said that the spending of money in a campaign is equivalent to free speech. So the Supreme Court has to be willing to consider constitutional some legislative parameters that we would put around it. So this race has been really ugly. There have been charges of racism, of anti-Semitism. Do you think these charges are fair? Well, no, but I think, as you remember, when we had this conversation 6 months ago when I first got into the race, I was very precise about not criticizing the incumbent on a personal level. He hasn't stopped from doing that. No, he's been more than happy from the minute he began his campaign to make personal attacks on me. So I think at some point in time, the people in the district understand that you have a right to defend yourself. And when people make charges or they make accusations about your record that are not true, you push back on them. We've had a progressive record in Westchester. We've had a bipartisan record in Westchester. We've done things from cutting county property taxes to doing black maternal health care and reducing the cost of child care. That's the actual record. If I were the incumbent in this race and I had a strong record in Congress, I wouldn't talk about my challenger. Why would I care? I can tell you why I've been an outstanding congressman. So the fact that they've launched off with attacks on me, I think bespeaks of the problem that he has in being able to make his case. I'm making my case all across the district to people of all different backgrounds, and I'm getting a good response. So there's been a big issue in this district about who supports Israel and who supports aid to Israel, etc. And just recently, Mr. Bowman apologized for claiming that charges that there were rapes and child murders on October 7th by Hamas. He said they were lies, and now he's apologized for them. Do you accept his apology? Well, I accept his apology. I think the real apology belongs to all of the women that were raped and had hideous things happen to them, and children being killed. The fact that he, as late as 3 days before an election, 4 days before an election, took to that point in time to apologize tells me that he's probably seeing the political downside of holding to that position previously. But I'll accept his apology. And what's more important is to understand that we are not framed just by this campaign. It's what we believed and what we said beforehand. I've been a supporter of Israel, but not a blank check. But I understand that Israel is a state that has legitimacy, and it has a right to exist under defensible borders. And he's been hostile to Israel over an extended period of time. That hostility was reflected before I got in the race. You had many Jewish groups that had much difficulty with him. So his apologies now, I guess, are welcomed, but they're also coming just before an election.
So let's talk about this. I know it's been an ugly race, it's been an intense race, but I think that what voters in Westchester and the Bronx really care about is what you can do to improve their lives. Right. And I wonder, if you were to go to Washington, what your priorities would be and what you think you could do for the people who you represent.
Well, I'll give you just a couple of examples. There's a multitude of examples. I think affordability in general is important, and one of the things that I would prioritize is the restoration of the SALT tax deduction, which was taken away.
That would have been my first question.
It absolutely has hurt people of all different ethnic backgrounds, all different levels of income, and there are homeowners who are house rich and cash poor in the south side of Mount Vernon, in parts of Portchester, and in Harrison and Eastchester, and in Wakefield, all across, who have lost a big chunk of affordability because they're now paying money on taxes that they did not have the use of that money. It went to the state. So I think that's a priority, and that should be something you talk about on a regular basis and put a bipartisan group together to work against. But I'll give you another example, a more practical example. Affordable housing is important. What would I do as a congressman along those lines? I would go to the leader of the Democratic Conference, Hakeem Jeffries, let's say he's the speaker, and I'd say to his staff person, Mr. Speaker, get me an appointment with the Region 3 Director for Housing and Urban Development based here in Manhattan. I want to go in with facts and figures about what we're doing for projects that are pending in New Rochelle, in Larchmont, in Wakefield, wherever there may be. Go in with facts and figures, and I would, as the salesman that I once was, pitch why we need that support for these local projects. I wouldn't waste my time making a speech in some other part of the country about how affordable housing is right. I would worry about how could I get that revenue. I did that in Albany successfully when I served representing Westchester in both houses of the state legislature. That's what a legislator can do.
But you're taking a big leap of faith that the Democrats are going to take control of the House come November. That's going to be a tough race.
Well, anything can happen, and who sits in the White House and who sits in leadership of both houses are very much up in the air. Obviously, I'm a Democrat. I support Democrats in these positions, but I was in the minority in the state Senate, and I was in the Assembly when there was a Republican governor in the state level. I still got bills passed and signed into law. It's not easy to do, and you have to pick your spots. And I would look for allies across the aisle on given issues. Doesn't mean we agree on some issues, but we find an issue, like flooding. Flooding's a major issue in Westchester County. It affects the Bronx as well. There are Republican Congress members who have flooding problems too. So you try to work across the aisle on those issues. When you sit in an extreme element of the House with 10 people in the squad, and you don't develop broad-based relationships in your conference, and you have no relationships across the aisle, you're not going to accomplish those things. I would look for those relationships to try to make progress.
A lot of people in your district are concerned about the fact that Social Security and Medicare, the funding for that is running out. The question is, would you be able to find ways to fund it? Would it be taxes, or like the Republicans want to let it just expire? So what would you do?
Well, we can't let it expire, and we can't let those programs die.
But how do you fund it?
Well, the national program that would move it, let's assume that you do have a House leadership that's prepared to pass a bill. You would look at how you would fund it given the existing revenue streams and where you'd have to increase them. But, well, taxes are one of the revenue streams. But you can't sit here and say, here's what I'm going to do to make this happen. You have to have a full plan. I've learned now, because I've been a legislator for 30 years prior to being an executive, rather than speak generically as people do, we're going to raise taxes on the rich. Let's put a plan together. If the plan makes sense and it shows that it can fund Social Security and Medicaid care for a more extended period of time, then that becomes a sensible plan you can vote for, not just in theory, but in practicality. And if it involves additional taxation, then you show where that taxation would come from, and you tell the American people, this is what the money is going for. It's not just, I'm going to raise taxes with an open-ended situation. We've shown during my tenure in county government that we can can manage the government effectively and not just raise taxes, but we had the revenue to do things like make buses free, like provide additional funding for neighborhood health centers. We were able to do that within our revenue streams because we were smart managers of money. And you can do that at the federal level if you want to. You have to want to do it.
But we have about 15 seconds left. Do you really think you're going to be able to do that?
Look, I've got to try. And I think every Congress member goes not thinking that they're going to be the answer to the question, but they're going to participate with other committed people to try to turn it around. If we don't do that, Marcia, then we're not going to have democracy.
And on that note, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. It's been a busy time for Comptroller Brad Lander, taking on two top Democrats in New York, both Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams. First, let's talk about Governor Hochul. You are leading a coalition that is threatening to sue the governor if you don't get congestion pricing by June 30th.
That's what the law says. It's supposed to go into effect June 30th under the law of the state of New York.
But do you think that you have a case?
Absolutely. I mean, look, first and foremost, it's a good policy. I understand not everybody loves it, but we need that $15 billion to extend the Second Avenue subway, to modernize our signal system, to make our subways accessible for people who can't use them now, and also to reduce traffic, which is crazy. It's as bad as it has ever been, and bring down emissions. That's why the legislature adopted it and why the then governor signed it in 2019. So the law is right there. It says congestion pricing shall go into effect, and the governor doesn't have the unilateral authority to cancel it or indefinitely pause it on her own.
So is that the argument, that the governor lacks the legal authority to do it because the legislature passed it?
Yes, that's right. Look, I have to sign paperwork before the city does a bond issuance. If I don't sign the papers, the city can't issue the bonds, but I'm not complying with the law. The mayor would go into court and I'd be required to sign the paperwork. This is like that. The law requires that congestion pricing move forward.
So here's my question. You're the financial expert of the city. She argues that because of inflation, because it's too much for people to pay, that we shouldn't do it. Do you agree with her assessment that $15 is just too much for people to pay?
Well, first, it's her panel that chose the $15 number, so there was time to have this conversation earlier. But second, the vast majority of people who work in Manhattan ride the subways, and so they need a functional subway system that doesn't have the fare going up and up because the signals are breaking down, because the elevators are breaking down. Many, many more workers, many, many more businesses rely on mass transit. Only a very small percentage of essential workers or businesses drive into Manhattan. So for me, from an economic and fiscal point of view, it's kind of a no-brainer. The city's economy will be better with those investments in the subway.
But she's trying to say, I don't mean to interrupt you, she's trying to say that our economy is fragile. We haven't come back totally from COVID, and this is what she calls a shock to the system at this time. As the city's chief financial officer, do you agree with that?
Well, we have more jobs now than we've ever had in the city's history, even more office-using jobs than we've ever had in the city's history. So the economy is recovering. Now, there are real issues. Of course, remote work is a whole new thing that we're still adjusting to, but the city's economy, the whole metropolitan economy, relies on mass transit first and foremost. And if we don't keep investing in it, then that's what's going to take the economy down.
So in a recent interview with CBS, the governor said that $15 was very high, and in studying congestion pricing in other places, they've started with a lower price point. Do you think she's hinting at a deal, and would you accept a lower price point if you could get congestion pricing off the ground?
Well, one thing to say is it's not $15 all the time. Overnight, it's only, I think, $3.75, and depending on where you go and who you are. The whole idea is to have a more dynamic pricing structure, so it discourages people from traveling in at peak hours and sets a framework that reduces traffic in addition and reduces emissions. So look, I think the panel could have done a more creative job, and if what it takes to get it going is to go back and look at it. If that's how she'll get it off indefinite pause and move it forward, then I'm open. We need a solution here.
Do you think she's hinting at a compromise?
Look, I hope so. I want to see it move forward. The goal is not to have endless lawsuits. The goal is to have better and more functional subways that run on time, that have elevators that work, that have less traffic, that have cleaner air. So let's problem solve and get that going.
But the argument has always been that we have to have $1 billion raised from the toll booth because we need to bond $15 billion to do all the subway projects. So if you accept a lesser fee, like say $10 or whatever it turns out to be, what happens then?
Well, two choices. Either the legislature can come up and fill in the gap. You know, if they say, all right, we'll have 90% of the revenue from congestion pricing, can we come up with the other $200 million? That's a lot easier to find a year than $1 billion. Or you have to cut projects. I don't want to cut projects. Probably, unfortunately, the first thing they'll cut is making subway stations accessible. People with disabilities have been fighting for 40 years, and even with the legal settlement they won under the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's going to take another 30 years to get most of the system accessible. So I don't want to see those elevators cut. We need to come up with the revenue.
So where do you see a compromise here?
Well, the date is going to be a source of compromise. I wish it was going to go into effect on June 30th, but obviously that's not happening. So it's going to be delayed. I don't want it delayed long because we got to get moving. And, you know, there might be room on looking at the fee structure. The legislature could come up with some modest additional resources elsewhere. Let's get all that happening quickly. But look, the infrastructure's there. We already spent $500 million on the cameras and the tolling infrastructure. It's ready to go. And you know the improvements take a while. We're not going to build that 2nd Avenue extension to East Harlem overnight, but if we don't start now, we might never get there.
So would you accept a lower fee structure?
Well, it's got to be part of a package. I want to know, when is it starting? I want to know, what is the fee structure? I want to know, where is the other revenue coming from? To me, the easier thing to do is just move forward in the way that the law provides. But if we could reach a compromise soon that advances the goals of cleaner air, of less traffic, and of better subways, yes, I'll take it.
So let's talk about Mayor Adams, who now has a charter revision committee that's looking at different ways to change how city does business. You've asked for the Charter Revision Commission to consider changes to the fiscal laws of the city, but also the head of the City Council has called on the Charter Revision Commission to include their advise and consent resolution, which would allow them to approve some 20 or so commissioners. Do you think that should also be included in the charter revision that goes before the voters?
Well, as I understand it, what Speaker Adams has asked is that the mayor's panel wait until next year to put any recommendations on the ballot and just put the council's proposal before the voters in the fall. And unfortunately,
Yeah,
with
but
so much
what's the
of
likelihood of that happening?
I mean, look, the likelihood that, look, there's a lot of reasons to doubt the mayor's motives in appointing this Charter Revision Commission. Every commission in the past was appointed much earlier to make time for people to have public testimony, to look at the whole charter. This was hastily convened. It's too many people that are close to the mayor. Its only purpose was to put the kibosh on what the council proposed. So I don't like any of that, but I thought, okay, here's an opportunity. Let me try to be grown up in the room. Here's 5 constructive proposals backed by good government groups so that we save enough money for a time of economic downturn. Right now we have a rainy day fund, but no rules for putting money into it. So it's not big enough to get us through a recession. Let's pay our vendors on time. Right now we're 8, 9, 10 months late. Let's know how much it would cost to put our infrastructure in a state of good repair. I hope they'll take them. I don't know what the odds are, but I wanted to be constructive and put the proposals out there.
So there's rumors that you're thinking about running for mayor. What's your thought?
Look, I'm thinking about it really seriously. I love this city. I love serving the city. When I'm out talking to people, there's real anxiety about how much things cost and affordability, housing especially, about safety, about mopeds, a whole set of issues. And people aren't feeling that they're getting the leadership we need from City Hall. You know, people are saying to me, look, we just want a city where the neighborhood public libraries are open and the illegal weed shops are closed. Is that too much to ask? I haven't made a final decision yet, and I've promised to come back and talk to you when I do.
So we have about 20 seconds left. What's your time frame about making a decision?
I'm looking at it right now in the coming weeks.
So you're going to make a decision in the coming weeks whether to run?
Yes.
And on that note, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. Thank you for joining me. Now, for me, one of the best things about summer in the city is Mr. Softy, a twist cone with chocolate sprinkles. Yum. New Yorkers, though, have other faves. They're weighing in on your point. What's the best thing about summer in the city?
Oh my God, everything.
Everything.
If you look around, everybody's in a good mood, everybody's happy.
It's quite magical.
All the street fairs.
Probably getting like drinks by the water.
The pool.
The beach. A lot of the festivals and parades.
Concerts and movies and stuff.
Getting to hang out with my friends.
Summer in the city, that it goes all night. You can be out till 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and you're still having fun.
Oh, I love 4th of July in the city.
Yeah, that's
the
great.
Macy's fireworks. Like, you can't beat them.
Being able to sit outside and work.
Is that what you're doing? You're working, you're using the park to work?
Yeah, absolutely. There's free Wi-Fi, bathrooms nearby.
All the ice cream trucks.
Oh my God, I love you.
Everyone loves Mr. Softy. If you're not a New Yorker unless you live for Mr. Softy.
What's the worst thing?
The humidity.
Yeah, the humidity in the subway for sure.
How hot the subway is.
Waiting for the subway in like what feels like 900-degree
Because
heat.
they're not air conditioned.
The platforms are not, no.
The worst thing is the subway when the car isn't air conditioned.
Unair-conditioned subway cars.
Unair-conditioned subway with people who, maybe forgot to shower that morning.
The bonus thing. That everybody's outside and it's crowded.
Yeah, like there's so many tourists and it's really difficult to get around. The garbage smell.
And then, of course, garbage is always an issue in New York
Garbage?
City. Well, just, big piles of it.
The city rats, they come out to play. Pizza Rat is here.
What are you looking forward to this summer?
I'm just looking forward to a little more quiet time and relaxation.
Getting away. Trying to take some time off.
Probably the beach. I love the beach.
The summer camp job. I love my job and I love working with kids, so very excited about that.
I'm looking forward to seeing people that I don't get to see very often.
Vacationing with my family in the Outer Banks. The block parties. I'm a huge fan of block parties.
The sunny weather. People enjoying themselves on vacation.
Actually, the weekends when everybody leaves to go to the Hamptons and I can just kind of enjoy the city.
So what are you looking forward to this summer?
Just the joy of being here.
I'm with you.